it almost started a fight between the wife and I, because I'd struggled with this thing for like 2 minutes now, right? And then she starts saying, hand it over. Give it here, I'll get in. At that point, I'd put enough time into this, dude, that I was like, no way I'm handing it over just in case she just gets it off right away, right? Like, it's one of those, so it's the child-proof locking on this edible container for these mints, and you had to press the two sides, you had to push on the top, and then pop the bottom. I'm like, how the hell does anyone have enough hands to do this? I'm getting worked up just telling you about this.
Oh,
it was for that, because we were going to watch that new Ghostbusters movie. Well, we
Right.
did watch it, and I was like,
was
it was great, actually. I loved it. Once I got into my edibles, it was fine. I just about needed to smoke a joint to calm down just to get into the thing. Anyways, how was your night, buddy?
Uneventful in comparison. I didn't even realize that
Ghostbusters
Ghostbusters was ready to be watched yet. So
yeah, well, there you go. All right, pal, I'm ready when you are.
all right, well, I hit record in the middle of your story once again because I could tell.
Okay.
So
Okay.
I wish I caught the start of that, but the ending was still
Right.
good. So we're rolling. Anyway.
Okay.
We're rolling.
All right. Well, good morning, everybody.
Good morning.
Welcome to the Walk Off. I'm Scott Belford, joined as always by Adam Mack. We have all sorts of good stuff to talk about today. We're going to obviously take a quick update on where the lockout is at. We're going to look at some internal options for fifth starters in this Blue Jays rotation. And it's funny because we haven't really talked much about that fifth starter in the rotation. We've kind of assumed that it's going to go to an outside source, right? That they're still not done signing pitchers and filling holes and stuff, but there are some options there. We are going to deep dive into Adam Cimber and what he means to this bullpen going into 2022. And by the way, before we get into all this, I do wish to quickly tease Chad Dallas. So we sat down with Chad Dallas on Wednesday. The Cheese. He is actually the fourth round draft pick from 2021 for the Toronto Blue Jays. Big right-handed starting pitcher, and went to the College World Series with the Tennessee Volunteers. It was a great little chat, and that's actually up on our YouTube page and wherever you get your podcasts right now. So check that out if you get a chance. We do have some great guests coming up throughout the month of January. I know we're going to sit back down with Jordan Groshans, who we talked with 7-8 months ago, right before the start. Actually, it probably was 9 months ago now. It was spring training last year. So Arash Madani is going to try and make some time with us here. So some good stuff coming up.
Awesome. All right.
I guess we should, one last housekeeping thing with the socials, right?
Yeah,
You can
let's
follow
get
us on
the
Instagram, right? Might as well.
Yeah, let's do it.
Socials, you can get a hold of us on Instagram and follow us there, The Walk Off Podcast, on Twitter at Walk Off Podcast, and on TikTok. There.
We're done.
We're good to go, buddy.
Okay. Have a great day. We'll see you guys for the mailbag next week.
Yeah.
No. Lockout news. What's going on with the lockout?
Yeah.
Scott?
Well, I mean, the truth is same old, same old. However, a little bit of news has trickled out. Jeff Passan reporting just a few days ago that the MLB is currently putting together some proposals to bring to the table. Negotiations set to get back up and going here end of January. Why it has taken this long, I don't know. We all predicted this. Everyone kind of saw this coming, that they're going to wait right till the last minute to have as much pressure on both sides as possible. But kind of frustrating.
It's a no news update, but it is still, I think, an important first step, because this will be the first real opportunity for both sides to even express formally and officially what they actually want moving forward.
Which is insane. This has not been stated already.
Right, exactly. It is insane, but it will be nice to at least know, here's what we want, here's what you want, and now we can try and argue over what the middle ground is. But until we even know what each side's priority is officially, where the negotiations will begin.
Some things has trickled out as to what each side would like. It is said that the MLBPA is after a luxury tax around 245 million. It currently is sitting at 210. I guess the owners, so MLB, is looking to have that around 220. So there is a fairly substantial gap there as to where the two sides would like to land that. When players go to free agency is going to be another big sticking point in this CBA negotiations. Just got to wait and see where it lands.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, let's get into some Blue Jays stuff.
Okay.
I saw this stat just yesterday, buddy, and it blew my mind. So this first part of the stat, everybody is already aware of. If you followed this Blue Jays team in 2021, you are a fan of the power they brought to the table, because that team hit dingers from spot 1 through spot 9 in the lineup. Everyone was doing their part, and it is why the Toronto Blue Jays in 2021 finished the season second in Major League Baseball in home runs. Now, this next part of the stat, I honestly did not believe it when I read it, and I had to double check it twice.
Right.
So the Toronto Blue Jays finished the season with the fewest strikeouts in all of baseball.
Wow, that's awesome.
Isn't that? They were averaging 7.5 strikeouts a game.
Wait. Are we talking about from our hitters or from our
hitters?
Staff?
No, from our hitters, right?
I wasn't sure which way you were going with this stat.
Oh, no, and I'm glad you cleared that up, because honestly, from our starters, you would almost accept that stat, right? Being like, oh, yeah, Robbie Ray was a strikeout machine. No, the hitters had the fewest strikeouts in all of Major League Baseball. In fact, by quite a bit. The next closest team was going to be Houston, and they struck out 7.65 times a game. Just to put this in perspective, by the way, the Chicago Cubs finished 30th and struck out 9.8 times a game. So the Blue Jays literally were striking out almost 2.5 times less than the Chicago Cubs. And you don't... It's a big deal, man. And I'm really surprised by this stat, because when you see a team with so much power, you almost always think that they strike out a lot.
Right.
Yeah, exactly. They just go hand in hand, strikeouts and home runs. And I mean, I guess we just all saw Randall Grisham strike out so many times, it just felt like they were a high strikeout team. Yeah. But the truth is, you start to go up and down this lineup, and you're like, yeah, that actually makes sense, you know? Mm-hmm. Vladdy and Springer are guys that, yeah, they hit for power, but they hit all over the field. Bo led the league in hits. Mm-hmm. This is a team that hits for contact and even hits for average. Even Teoscar, you look at him, he was flirting with 300 the whole year, and really the only strikeout guys on this team were Gurriel and Grisham. Mm-hmm. It almost makes you think, could this team fit a high strikeout guy in the lineup and it be all right? Maybe a lefty bat, right? A Kyle Schwarber, perhaps?
Absolutely.
My apologies. I'm well aware that I have been obsessed with a lefty bat the last few episodes. I want one so bad, Adam.
That's quite all right. I think we all do. I think lefty bat with a little bit of power, as much as we all love Kevin Biggio here. Not quite the lefty bat that we are wanting.
Exactly. Kevin Biggio definitely breaks up the right-handed hitters at the back end of this this order, but would be nice to see someone in that 3 or 4 hole kind of split things up, right?
Sure would.
Okay, so let's transition here to pitching. Now, I had in the show notes on Wednesday to bring up Ross Stripling, because he seems like the forgotten man when we're talking about starters on this team. Ross Stripling, of course, brought into the fold at the trade deadline in 2020. Turned out to be a really good move. They wound up moving. Who were the guys they moved for him? A couple minor leaguers, right?
Yes. The minor leaguers were Ryan Noda and Kendall Williams.
Right.
Now, what's really impressive about that stat is that I had that trade pulled up before we started recording today. And then,
Yeah.
as you know, I have my difficulties and had to restart my computer. Forgot to pull that tab back up. So I'm actually pulling that from memory.
Wow.
I know, right?
Look at this.
Right?
Well, I always say it. You're the best co-host in the biz for a reason, right?
Well, thank you. Now let me just double check the facts that I threw at you. And yes, it was in fact Ryan Noda and Kendall Williams. So a pitcher and an outfielder in the minors.
For what Ross Stripling has done for this team, it's a pretty impressive trade. The fact that he is under contract for another year. Is he the guy that every Jays fan would like to see in that fifth hole? Probably not. However, if you do take a look at fifth starters across the MLB, Ross Stripling fits right into that kind of category. The average fifth starter pitches about 100 innings a year. Ross Stripling finished with 98 last year. What were his final numbers? What was his ERA finishing at?
Well, I didn't have that memorized, so while I went on that tangent, I did pull it up. So his ERA for 2021 was a 4.8 over 101 innings.
101.
He had
Now, just a heads up, everybody, the average ERA for a fifth starter is around 4.6. So he's not that off of the average fifth starter.
below average, but not an absolute black hole.
Exactly.
Ks per 9 was 8.3, pretty impressive.
Mm-hmm.
Walks per 9 only 2.7, so
Which is great.
yeah, basically
That's the sort of guy you'd like in that
that's a great
fifth
K
spot.
to
Is a
walk
guy
ratio for sure.
exactly. Another thing I did wish to bring up about Ross Stripling is he did have a 13-game stretch in the middle of the season when the Blue Jays needed quality starts the most. And some of you might remember that. Remember when it went from us panicking about the bullpen in May and June, and then them bringing up Alek Manoah because starters just couldn't get it done, and everyone was panicking. Is Alek ready? Is Manoah ready? And he did wind up being ready. However, of course, 23-year-old, first time in the bigs, he had some starts that were less than desirable. Obviously, he used them to learn, and you can never expect a rookie to just be lights out all the time. But Ross Stripling, in those 13 games, from about the All-Star break until the middle of August when he wound up getting injured again, he had an ERA of 3.29. And some of you will remember that he had that adjustment made by Pete Walker. And then all of a sudden he was lights out. And he was a big reason, along with that turnaround in the Oakland series, that this team made such a push at the end of the year. Now, he did wind up getting injured again. And so that little run came to an end. And yes, his numbers were inflated because of how rough of a spot he had in May. He didn't pitch very well in May, and it did inflate his ERA. However, he's a guy who's a capable dude at the back end of that rotation. And I don't think it's worth it for the Blue Jays to go out and get a guy who's just another Ross Stripling.
Yeah.
And you've talked about this before, dude, that you're all fine them going out and getting another starter, but you want a starter that slots in higher in that rotation.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Yeah, bump everybody else down. Make Manoah the number 5.
And I kind of agree with that, because if you're just going to go out there and get a guy who slots in with the same sort of numbers as Ross Stripling, I think Ross is fine and completely capable in that back end of the rotation. And I think there is enough depth on this team between guys like Thomas Hatch and Anthony Kay and Zach Logue that if there's injuries, there are those guys who can come up and make those spot starts and maybe are given the opportunity to flourish themselves. Do I wish to see Anthony Kay and Thomas Hatch as the everyday fifth starters? No, and of course they're only one injury away from that. So yes, maybe a little bit of depth is needed.
It is funny, though, when you evaluate your own team, how you can be your own worst critic so easily. You know, we look at the Ross Stripling in the 5 spot, and it just feels like, well, this isn't a contending team if we have such a bad end of the... But, like, nobody does.
No,
right?
they don't.
And you brought it up with the like the strikeouts and stuff, right? Earlier, 5 minutes ago. It's
Mhm.
just, you feel like this team would strike out a lot, and it's surprising when you hear that, like, oh, we had the least strikeouts in the entire league,
Yeah.
right? And it's kind of like the same thing with our catchers. Like our catchers feel like such a friggin' hole, and then you realize, like,
Mhm.
oh yeah, most catchers just aren't great hitters,
Yeah.
right? Like when I say that Danny Jansen is going to be a top 5 catcher next year, that sounds like a wildly hot take. I'm only talking about bumping him up 4 or 5 spots from what he did
Yeah.
last year, right?
Yeah.
Like it's not that wild, but it
Agreed.
feels painful when you're only looking at your own catchers, right? So,
It's like looking at this bullpen, which we will get into shortly here. We are going to talk Adam Cimber and some of the other pieces in this bullpen, right? It felt like such a detriment in 2021. It's easy to go, we need big time bullpen help, but you
mhm.
start going through what they've done and where this bullpen sits currently, right now, January of 2022. And it's not so bad, and we will get into that. But, you're right when you say that the biggest holes on your team feel even bigger
Mhm.
from your own perspective as a fan, right? Because we're sitting here watching the Jays all the time, and maybe the numbers don't look as bad as they feel.
Exactly.
If that makes
Exactly.
sense, right? Ross Stripling in the 5 hole, I think, is what we're going to see. There are other options, and I mean, the big question mark on this team continues to be Nate Pearson.
Mhm.
And I watched a video on YouTube the other day from a content creator by the name of Jolly Olive, and he did a phenomenal job on a little piece on Nate Pearson. He brought up the Milwaukee Brewers and the way that they develop starting pitching, which is a very unique way of developing starting pitching, and it has worked very well for them. And they bring their guys up through the bullpen, and they kind of use them as these, for lack of a better term, super relievers. So they kind of and they did this with Brandon Woodruff, who is now one of the best pitchers in all of
Mhm.
baseball, where they kind of started him in the bullpen. He was a guy who was logging 2 to 3 innings, kind of middle relief style stuff. And then as the year went on, or a guy got injured, maybe he would be called on to stretch himself out and pitch an extra inning. They did the same thing with Corbin Burns in 2020. And
Right.
again,
Look
he
how that turned
was
out.
Cy Young Award
Mhm.
winner last year. And then even look at what they did with Freddie Peralta, who wound up ending the season as one of their top starters. But he was a guy at the beginning of 2021 was pitching 2 innings in that bullpen.
Mhm.
So there is a pathway here that the Blue Jays can follow for Nate Pearson, because Nate Pearson has phenomenal stuff. There's a reason why only 18 months ago, right, that he was
Mhm.
ranked a top 5 prospect in all of baseball and the number 1 pitching prospect in all of baseball. That wasn't that long ago.
Mhm.
Nate Pearson just turned 25 this offseason. So he's got a little bit more age, a little bit more experience. He's still throwing gas. He's still a fireballer, triple digits, and his slider is phenomenal. This is one thing that doesn't get talked about very often with Nate Pearson. His whiff rate on his slider is actually at 44%. It's much higher than his fastball. I know. Now, the problem with his slider has been location. And I know that when we sat down and chatted with his pitching coach in the offseason, right, Anthony Telford, that was the one big thing he took away. He's like, Nate gets all worried about all of these analytics, and he's constantly checking his spin rate. Nobody gives a shit about spin rate if you're not locating. And I
Mhm.
think that's going to be one of the big things that they concentrate on over the offseason, Nate, when he's training, is going to be locating.
Right.
So if they put him in a situation in the bullpen where he's maybe coming in, he's a guy like the Brewers used Freddie Peralta as, right? As a piggyback guy.
Mhm.
When a starter goes, maybe the 5th starter is Ross Stripling, and maybe he's limited in his innings so that he doesn't face the opposing batting order a third time through the order, which
Right. Right.
everyone knows analytics hate that third time through the order, right?
Right. Right. You bring him out in the 4th, but you still need someone who can help lengthen that appearance before you really get into the nitty gritty of your
And
high
Nate could
leverage
be
guys.
that guy.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And I mean, it's a very small sample size, but if you're going to look at what Nate Pearson did last year in relief, it is pretty dang impressive. So he had 12.2 innings in relief last year. He allowed 4 earned runs. He had 20 strikeouts, 7 walks. But if you go an even smaller sample size and just look at what he did in the last 2 weeks of the season in the bullpen, in 9.2 innings, he allowed 1 earned run. He allowed 5 hits, and he had 15 Ks, which is elite. That's under a 1 ERA. I'm well aware that all the detractors of Nate Pearson are going to say, well, Scott, you couldn't take a smaller sample size. That's barely over a game. Very true.
Right, but if it was the same exact sample size and he had an ERA of 7.5,
exactly, people would be freaking out.
No one would be saying, "Relax, it's a small sample size."
Yeah,
right. So either the sample size matters or it doesn't matter, and like, it's a factor, but it's still encouraging for sure.
What's exciting about Nate Pearson is that he is so out of the spotlight at this point.
Mm-hmm.
Think about where he was last year at this time.
Oh, yeah. No, it's night and day.
He was literally making appearances on MLB Network where they were asking him about the Hall of Fame. Like, legit, it was insane what this kid was being put through at 24 years old.
Yeah.
He was being compared to Nolan Ryan. Like, can we just hit the brakes for a second here? And I think the fact that Alek Manoah came out and did so well and kind of took his spot in the rotation, and I think this is why the Blue Jays may very well follow this Brewer roadmap to developing him into a starter, is that they are a contending team at this point.
Mm-hmm.
Right? The 2022 Blue Jays are expected to be a playoff team.
Yeah.
There's not a lot of rope to let this kid find his way in the starting rotation. Mm-hmm. That was something they were prepared to do for Nate last year, and then he ran into injury problems, and Alek Manoah kind of took that spot.
Mm-hmm.
But 100 miles an hour with a deadly slider in the bullpen, a guy who can go 2 innings, every team out there is after that. And if you look at what the Milwaukee Brewers did with the 3 guys we just talked about, think about the Milwaukee Brewers when they failed at developing a starter. Then you still have a guy like Hader, who's one of the best relievers in the league, right? Yeah. So if you can develop a guy with a killer fastball and an above-average slider, and I mean, it doesn't even limit you anymore to just the bullpen. Look at what Robbie Ray did with 2 pitches last year. He won the Cy Young. So I think that is something that we're going to see the Blue Jays do with Nate Pearson, is try to bring him up through the bullpen. We might see him break with this team out of spring training.
Yeah, I think it would be good for his development to start, like, to make the team, even just in like a vote of confidence kind of way.
Exactly, man.
But
I
in
feel
a low
the same
pressure
way.
Scenario. So I think that would be a
it
good
does
for him. And like you said, if you just took the Nate Pearson name and like the hype that Jays fans have had for the last 3 years around this kid, you just take that out of it, right? And you just read the stats that, I mean, again, small sample size, yes, we'll throw the asterisk on that. But if you just read that stat line and said we're trading for a bullpen arm who throws 100 plus an hour.
Yeah.
This was his stats, through the last half of last season. We'd be thrilled. We'd be like,
we'd be so excited.
Amazing addition to this bullpen. Who did we give up to get him, right? Like, we'd be so.
And I think the bullpen might be a little bit more of a complete picture than Blue Jays fans are giving it credit for, because the more you start to deep dive this bullpen, the more you're like, you know what? This is a pretty solid group of dudes. We just talked about Nate Pearson and where he fits in there. I wish to get into Adam Cimber a little bit here. Obviously, Jordan Romano is the highest leverage arm in this bullpen. He's a guy who is proven to Charlie Montoya and to Blue Jays fans in general, he can do it. He's the guy.
Ice in the veins. He is not going to
Ice in the veins.
Pressure.
Yimi Garcia is an under-the-radar ad this offseason. Shapiro and Atkins went out and signed Yimi Garcia, formerly of the Miami Marlins, a guy that supposedly they were sniffing around when they wound up getting Adam Cimber out of Miami. And the Marlins weren't prepared to trade him yet. They did wind up moving him to the Astros at the trade deadline. But this is a guy who also has some back end of the rotation experience. He's got a great fastball and locates well. You look at Tim Mayza, who really appeared as a big left-handed guy at the back end of that pen. Adam Cimber fits so well into this bullpen. And Adam Cimber, what's really interesting about him is the way that Charlie used him in 2021. And I think we're going to see him used that way all year round, where he is the highest leverage reliever when it's not the 8th or 9th inning.
Yeah.
So there's problems with, let's throw it out there, Ross Stripling.
Sure.
5th inning. Struggling to get through that third time through the lineup. Guy at first base. Adam Cimber was who we were seeing coming out of that bullpen all 2021. And this is a guy that I think we're going to see get even more innings in 2022. He doesn't have, with the lower arm slot, he's not putting the same sort of pressure on his arm. He's the guy who can throw more innings in a season. He's such a deceptive delivery as well.
Yeah, that's.
And so when we're bringing up guys like Julian Merriweather and Nate Pearson, who are throwing 100 miles an hour, Cimber is such a guy that's going to set these dudes up so well, right? So you're going to, let's say Alek Manoah pitches 6 innings, gets into some trouble. You bring in Adam Cimber, all of a sudden a completely different look. He's got that big sweeping slider. He's coming from down under. And then all of a sudden you bring out Nate Pearson to throw 100 miles an hour. It's pretty exciting stuff, right? And Cimber constantly shows he can lock it down. Let's go over some of his numbers as a Blue Jay, because when you start to look at what Adam Cimber did for this Toronto Blue Jays team in 2021, until you actually see the numbers, you don't truly appreciate what a lockdown, shutdown guy Cimber was for this team.
All right, so in 2021, with 39 games with the Toronto Blue Jays, he pitched 37 and a third innings, had an ERA of 1.69, pretty incredible. WHIP, which is walks plus hits per inning pitched, under 1 at 0.964.
And that's elite.
And a strikeout to walk ratio of 7-1. So not bad.
One of the biggest reasons he was such a high leverage guy is exactly what Adam just touched on there. He didn't walk guys, and he doesn't allow hits.
Do you know how many home runs he gave up in 39 games?
Nope.
2.
Wow.
Yeah.
And this is why Cimber was the go-to guy with men on base. If there was problems, Cimber was getting the call out of the bullpen.
Yeah.
You cannot, I cannot put in, my vocabulary isn't good enough to use the words to truly describe how important of a cog he was in this Blue Jays bullpen machine. When there was trouble, he was the guy. And every team needs that.
Yeah, I mean, we just heap a pile of praise on Jordan Romano as the default closer for this team. Not really a guy who pitches as well when he inherits runners. Pitches substantially better when he comes in on a clean inning. Nobody up, and can just do what he does. When he's got to worry about
Julian Merriweather, same sort of thing with Merriweather.
So I think that's a great point about Adam Cimber. His numbers are really impressive, and that is a is a niche role, but it's very important to be able to come
really
in
is.
and shut an inning down. Because, like you said, you get a guy, whether it's Alek Manoah or Jose Barrios or whoever, right? They pitch really well. It can be the sixth inning. Maybe it's a 2-1 game and the Jays are up. Where they've pitched well, so we let them go out there for that third time through the order. All of a sudden, the leadoff man gets on, the next guy gets walked, and you're going, hey, right? And that's when Cimber is
runners in scoring position. Runners in scoring position is always trouble.
Mm-hmm.
And it's pretty cool the Blue Jays have found a guy to go to in these scenarios, a lockdown guy, a ground ball guy, a guy who doesn't walk guys. I said guy too many times there, but you know what I'm saying, everybody.
Or girls.
Or girls. Thank you, Adam.
It's very progressive of me to include all the female base runners that occur in the MLB.
I don't know. It's just kind of cool to realize that they, for Joe Panic, managed to bring in a guy who is just big game dude in a big time spots. And he, again, like that walk hit ratio, the fact that he's just so shut down.
Yeah.
It makes the back end of this bullpen so much more deadly. Knowing that you've got Adam Cimber, who's not going to go in there and make Jordan Romano work for his closer role, because Cimber has his own role, and it's just such a underrated and under-touted spot that he has kind of filled for this team.
Totally.
And he's under contract till 2024.
That's nice. Team control's always good.
Absolutely. Did you have anything else to add here, Blue Jays wise?
No, it was nice to talk Blue Jays with some positivity.
Yes.
This is a good way to start my morning.
Absolutely. Okay. Before we get out of here, I did wish to bring up that you and I are back on the road together here in February.
Oh, yes, sir.
So if you are a resident of Fort McMurray, Alberta, Adam Mack and Scott Belford going to be playing your casino February 16th. That is a Wednesday. Go. Yeah, come on out.
See you there.
All right. Thank you so much, everybody, for tuning in. We always appreciate the viewership. We appreciate anyone who has taken the time to listen to us wherever you get your podcasts. You can follow us on Twitter at Walk Off Podcast, on Instagram, the Walk Off Podcast, and on TikTok. Have a great day, everybody. Cheers.
Cheers.